The Dog of Pompeii, based on the short story by Louis Untermeyer. Background: When Vesuvius, a volcano near Pompeii, Italy, exploded in AD 79, ashes buried the city and killed most of its people. But the ashes also preserved Pompeii's streets, houses, and artwork. If you go to Italy today, you can see Pompeii as it was the day the volcano erupted. This story takes place in Pompeii almost 2,000 years ago, just as Mount Vesuvius is about to erupt or explode. Tito and his dog Bimbo lived in the old town of Pompeii. Pompeii was a happy place. The streets were lively. The open-air theaters and all sports events were free. Every year, Caesar, the Roman emperor, visited the city. For several nights, fireworks shows honored him. Tito saw none of Pompeii's amazing sights because he had been blind from birth. No one remembered his parents, but for the 13 years they remembered seeing Tito, people had seen Bimbo with him. Bimbo was not only Tito's dog, he was Tito's mother, father, nurse, pillow, and playmate. Bimbo left Tito only 3 times a day. Every morning, while Tito still slept, Bimbo disappeared. When Tito woke, Bimbo would be back, sitting quietly. At his feet, he'd have a large roll of fresh baked bread. Then, Tito and Bimbo would have breakfast. Bimbo would leave Tito at lunchtime. He always came back with a scrap of bread, meat, or fruit. Sometimes he'd bring a raisin and sugar cake that Tito especially loved. At supper time, Bimbo brought the smallest meal. Food was harder to grab when many people were around. In other words, Tito is a boy who is blind and homeless. No one knows what happened to his parents. Tito's dog Bimbo is his closest companion. The dog takes care of Tito, bringing him food every day. Bimbo often brings Tito's favorite food, raisin and sugar cakes. Tito didn't feel sorry for himself. He couldn't see Pompeii, but his ears and nose told him what was happening. The Forum was a square in the center of town. Everything happened there. It was the best place to find news. Many kinds of shops, the biggest temples, and the town hall were there. All of these public buildings were new. They had replaced buildings that an earthquake had brought down 12 years earlier. Tito did not remember the earthquake because it had happened when he was a baby. That earthquake had been a light one. Weak buildings had fallen down, but a more beautiful Pompeii had replaced the old one. People wondered what caused earthquakes. Some said they happened in order to teach people a lesson. Others said that the earth shook when the gods showed their anger. Everyone had a different idea to explain them. This afternoon, people in the forum were talking again about the earthquake. Tito's ears led him to where the talk was loudest. "I'll tell you, there won't be another earthquake in my lifetime. Earthquakes are like lightning. They never strike twice in the same place," one voice said. A stranger's voice answered, "Do they not? Remember those 2 towns that were ruined 3 times? And were the people not warned? Does that column of smoke above Vesuvius mean nothing?" "That?" said another voice. "That smoke is always there." "Yes, yes," cut in the stranger's voice. "But the column of smoke seems higher than usual. It's thick, and it spreads like a tree. We have a saying where I come from. It's this: those who will not listen to men must be taught by the gods. I say no more, but I leave a last warning. Notice, when the smoke tree above Vesuvius grows to the shape of a pine tree, then Watch out for your lives. In other words, Tito hears citizens of Pompeii talking about the smoke from Mount Vesuvius. They have experienced earthquakes in Pompeii, but they don't seem to understand what a volcano is. A stranger warns them to watch the smoke from Vesuvius so that they can protect themselves if this volcano explodes. Tito heard the stranger walk quickly away. He wondered what the stranger meant. Bimbo tilted his head as if he were also pondering it. But by nightfall the argument had been forgotten. The town was celebrating Caesar's birthday. Everyone was in a holiday mood. Tito and Bimbo went to the theater. Tito listened to the play. Then they went to the city wall where people watched a pretend sea battle with ships on fire. The cheers and shouts were exciting. The next morning, Bimbo brought Tito 2 raisin and sugar cakes for breakfast. Bimbo seemed to be trying to tell Tito something with his thumping tail, but Tito did not know what it was. He felt sleepy. A thick fog stuck in his throat and made him cough. He walked all the way to the sea gate, an opening in the wall around the city that led to the beach, to breathe in the sea air. But even the sea air seemed smoky today. That night, Tito did not sleep well. He dreamed of ships in the Forum and of being lost, with people marching over him. Finally, he was pulled over rough pavement stones. He woke to find that Bimbo was pulling him. The dog had dragged Tito to his feet and was pushing the boy along. Where they were headed, Tito did not know. He was still half asleep. The hot, heavy air was hard to breathe. It was filled with a fine powder that stung his nose and burned his eyes. Then Tito began to hear sounds. Hisses, groans, and cries from under the earth. They sounded like those of an agonized, dying animal. Now he could feel the earth suddenly move. Tito fell against a fountain. Hot water from the fountain splashed in Tito's face. He was more awake now. Helped by Bimbo, Tito hurried on. Now they heard louder human sounds. A few people, then many, rushed by. Then Tito could hear a roar, like the fall of a forest of trees. He could hear the crash of thunder and of buildings falling around them. By a miracle, Tito and Bimbo escaped to the Forum. It was safer there, and they rested a while. In other words, Bimbo seems excited, but Tito does not know why. Tito falls asleep. Bimbo wakes Tito up, trying to pull him to safety. Tito feels the earth shake. He hears people shouting and houses falling. Vesuvius is erupting. Tito had no idea of the time of day. His empty stomach told him it was past noon, but hunger didn't matter. Nothing seemed to matter. Tito was too tired to walk, but Bimbo pulled him on. And it was just in time. The ground of the Forum had begun to split open. The columns of the temple to Jupiter, the most important of all the gods, fell. The world seemed to be ending. Walking was not fast enough. They must run. But Tito was lost and didn't know where to go. Bimbo pulled him so hard his clothes nearly came off. Had Bimbo gone mad? What did he want? Then, suddenly, Tito understood. Bimbo was telling him the way out. They had to get to the sea gate. That was the only place away from the falling buildings and shaking ground. Bimbo guided Tito through the streets. They ran through the screaming crowds toward the sea gate. But everyone was headed that way, and it was getting harder to breathe. The air was all dust. Pebbles the size of beans fell onto Tito's head. The mountain of Vesuvius had been turned inside out. Tito remembered what the stranger said. Those who will not listen to men must be taught by the gods. The people of Pompeii had not listened. Now they were being taught, if it was not too late. Suddenly, it seemed too late for Tito. He fell at the side of the road. Bimbo licked Tito's face and hands, but Tito did not move. Then Bimbo did the last thing he could, the last thing he wanted to do. He bit Tito deep in the arm. Tito cried in pain and jumped up. Then he pounded on, with Bimbo barking at his heels. At last, Tito reached the sea gate and felt the sand under him. Then he fainted. He awoke to feel someone carrying him. "Bimbo!" he called. "Bimbo!" But Bimbo was gone. Tito heard voices saying, "The poor boy must be crazy with fear." They put Tito into a boat. He could hear oars splash as the boat rode over the waves. Tito was safe, but he kept calling, "Bimbo!" He cried and cried, but no one could comfort him. In other words, Bimbo pulls Tito toward the safety of the sea gate. Buildings fall around them. Tito falls down. Bimbo bites him so Tito will get up and keep running. They reach the sea. Tito faints. When he wakes up, he is safe in a boat, but Bimbo is gone. 1800 years passed. Scientists were digging up the ancient city of Pompeii. Several discoveries emerged. The eruption had killed over 2,000 people, but many things had been preserved in the ashes. "Look here," one scientist called to his assistant. "I think we've found what is left of a building that looks like a bakery." "What do you think I found under this heap of ashes?" "The bones of a dog." "Amazing," said his assistant. "You'd think a dog would have known enough to run away. Is that a stone between his teeth?" "No," the scientist answered. "It must have come from this bakery. It looks to me like a cake. And those things that look like black pebbles must be raisins. It's a raisin cake, almost 2,000 years old. I wonder what made the dog want it at such a moment." "I wonder," said the assistant. In other words, centuries later, scientists dig up what remains of Pompeii. They discover a dog's skeleton underneath the ruins of the bakery. The dog holds a raisin cake in his mouth. The Dog of Pompeii, based on the short story by Louis Untermeyer. Background: when Vesuvius, a volcano near Pompeii, Italy, exploded in AD 79, ashes buried the city and killed most of its people. But the ashes also preserved Pompeii's streets, houses, and artwork. If you go to Italy today, you can see Pompeii